All right, we are live on another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales. You're going to be seeing a lot of me. We've got a backlog of people that we just can't wait to get on the show. And so it seems like we're going to be doing a lot of these starting next week. Not next week, but beginning of May, we're really going to get on a regular schedule. I know I've mentioned this a few times, but tune in every Monday and Thursday at 4:20 to see a new, previously live aired version of Elevate Your Grind. We're going to figure out what day to do a live show. If you guys can, if you're watching this episode, please drop what you'd like to see in the comments. Is it better for us to do it at 4:30 in the afternoon, 4:20 in the afternoon? Would you rather see them at 2 p.m. or should we turn this into a morning show and wake up with you guys in the morning? We want to know what you want. We want to make sure that we're giving you the information that you want to see. My guest today is someone that you're going to want to see. So you don't get a choice in the matter. She is one of the unsung heroes of the cannabis industry. When we talk about some of the biggest challenges for cannabis companies right now, banking is always the number one challenge. Not having access to banking programs, not having access to banks, bank accounts, a lot of different things. My guest today is changing that. And she's working with companies. And not only that, she's leading the charge to make change in Washington as well, too. So very special guest today. I know I say that a lot, but maybe we should add a second. A very, very special guest today. Please welcome Dana Chaves.
Hi, Todd. Thank you for the introduction and for the ability to be on Elevate Your Grind today.
No, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us, because I can only imagine how busy you guys are at First Federal right now. So for you to take some time out of your day to help educate our audience means a lot to us. So, let's just start getting right to the point. In the cannabis industry, and I mentioned this in the introduction, the biggest challenge for companies is access to banking and access to small business loans and access to typical financing avenues for most startups that cannabis just can't get to. So most companies are stuck selling equity to raise money. And, it's not always fun, especially if it's a small amount of money, to have to give away equity just to buy some equipment or to open up a new dispensary or to get a new piece of real estate. That's not the best way to do business, because it dilutes the founder and then it dilutes the interest in the company. And I know not everybody's like that. So I went off on a little tangent, but talk to us. How are you guys able to support the cannabis industry? Because you guys are doing great work there at First Federal.
Okay, well, the major misnomer that when you call a bank and ask if they are banking the industry, and, a lot of banks will tell you no, because it's federally illegal. Well, that's not, of course, it's federally illegal, but banks individually have the ability to decide whether they want to take on the risk of starting a compliant banking program or not. And it starts at the top with the board of directors and the senior executives. In 2018, First Federal sat down and decided that since they had already previously banked high-risk, cash-intensive industries, that it just made sense to go into the cannabis industry, especially with the Florida landscape and how it's growing. So I came on board last year to help build and run the program. So we launched our cannabis banking program April 1st of last year, and in May we extended that to include CBD and hemp. We have a very successful program. We've opened up to nearly over 400 accounts to date, and we are excited to expand every day our capabilities and our products and services available to the cannabis space. Therefore, like I said, the biggest issue is whether or not banks will decide to take on the risk. There are a lot of inherent risks involved with the cannabis banking program and compliance.
Sure. And that's amazing that you guys have over 400 accounts now. So when I was doing my research for this interview, I saw an older article. It might have been from last summer. You guys only had 62 accounts at that time with 55 applications in the hopper. So less than a year later, you're up over 400, much more than that. So I want to kind of dig into how you're doing this a little. I read that your bank you're tiering these companies, right? So you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And if I recall correctly, tier 1 is plant touching companies. Tier 2 would be ancillary companies. And then tier 3 would be medical marijuana companies. As your process, like you said, there's a lot of risk involved with banking marijuana companies. Do you guys have a different risk profile for those tiers? And is there a different level of diligence needed to be done depending on the tier that a company's in?
Yeah, yes, glad you asked. Our tier 1 relationships are exactly that, revenue derived from the touching of the plant, whether it's growing, selling, extract, whatever. Those accounts right now are reserved for Florida state license holders, and we are expanding into other states here. We have one in mind that we're working on starting operations in about 90 days. And after that, it'll be before the end of the year before we can go into our third state for tier 1 operations. There's a lot involved with moving into each state. We want to be prepared with internal staff to monitor the transactions, because for tier 1, we do a very enhanced due diligence process. We look under every rock and behind every curtain with every company, and we do monitor every transaction at every location every day. Tier 2, on the other hand, it's the same application process, but not as in deep as far as the due diligence is concerned and the monitoring, although we do make sure that we can monitor all the transactions, whether it's incoming wires or outgoing wires. We are able to bank tier 2 businesses in all 50 states. So tier 2 can be anything from an ancillary business to a private equity firm to an investment firm, even as for a tier 1 company to house their capital raised dollars and pay their construction and run rate fees. Tier 3 is a little more farther removed, reserved for doctors' offices, lawyers, etc.
Very cool. Yeah, it's banking is a real issue, and I don't think people realize how much of an issue it is. And let me correct that. I think people probably realize how much of an issue it is for your tier 1 companies, right? The ones that are plant touching. But I think the general public doesn't realize that if you service the cannabis industry, even if it's not your main source of income, that you could potentially lose your bank account. Before I in my last role in the cannabis industry, I worked for an organization, and we had the name Cannabis in the title of an event that we were doing. And we were promoting that event. It was in our email signatures. And when we sent an email to the bank, they saw that and basically gave us, I want to say, a week to find a new bank. And this is a bank that my former boss was banking with for a very long time, had significant amounts of money in there, and it just didn't matter to them. And on top of that, we weren't servicing anybody plant touching. We was actually an event for ancillary companies to raise capital. So, you can be that far removed from the plant and lose your banking relationship. I read your testimony that you gave to Congress, the written one that's online. And you have a couple horror stories that you were able to solve and add a happy ending to. I don't know if you're able to share any of those with us today, but I think it's important for people to realize what's happening. And just real quick, I'll get into one that I know of beyond our own company. I interviewed Ricky Williams. I've been friends with Ricky for a while. Ricky and his wife had a CBD company, and Ricky Williams was an athlete. Athletes make a lot of money. He had a lot of money in the bank, and he lost his banking relationship. He lost not only their business, he lost his personal banking relationships, and I believe they got rid of some of his kids' bank's accounts. So I can only imagine the horror stories that you have. So would you mind sharing one or two with us if you can, and really how you stepped in and I want to say saved the day, because that's really what you did.
Right. I hear them. I get horror stories every day and try to help pick up the pieces for people and companies alike, so gosh, one in particular is, a Florida company who just purchased a license and they're not even doing anything yet. And their credit union told them that they had an hour to come and take $5 million out of their credit union.
An hour.
Says, well,
wow.
Wait an hour. And then she mentioned one of the regulators' names. And so the credit union said, well, on second thought, you have 15 minutes. Come get your cashier's check now.
Wow.
So we had to do, our due diligence typically takes 2 to 3 weeks before we can open an account, because that's how deep we have to dive into everybody's background. We had to have all hands on deck and get her application in and done in less than an hour, so we could open her account to take her funds. It was crazy. Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
Another instance is an executive from a major vendor company for the cannabis industry. Him and his wife were in the process of refinancing their home, and literally 30 minutes before they were supposed to close, their bank called and did a one last check on there and found out that he worked for a marijuana related business, and they refused to refinance his house. So we stepped in and took care of it for him. So it's stuff like that all the time.
So the banks are not only severing the relationships with the businesses, but also the people within the business too. So there are people that are being affected personally, if I'm reading this correctly.
Definitely. The banks don't want to refinance their homes, give them mortgages, or even service their employees' payroll paychecks. So we've made sure that we can help them with all of those products and services. We do auto loans, credit cards, mortgages for people in the cannabis space.
So let's get into that a little bit. I just want to do a quick aside. I actually, for the first time ever, but just because of who you are and how important this is to the cannabis industry, I pulled up our Facebook Live on my phone because I figured, hey, if people are watching this, they're probably going to have some good questions. However, nobody's asking questions. They're just praising you, saying how great you are. So nobody has questions for you, but they all want us to know how great you are. Actually, I'm going to call him out just because he's done this 3 times. But Barry Gordon is singing your praises very highly on our Facebook Live. So Barry, thank you for telling us how great Dana is. We're aware, and that's why she's here.
Thank you, Barry. Yes, they were one of our first Tier 3 clients.
Very cool. Well, Barry, thank you for commenting here. So I like going off on those tangents, but to get back on what we're talking about, you guys are banking the cannabis industry. You have your tiers, but I think there's still a lot of services that are not available to cannabis companies. When a company comes to you, besides just being able to have a banking account and a place to keep their money, what other services are you able to provide them that they would otherwise get from their typical banking relationship? Not that you're not a typical banking relationship, but you guys are, specializing in cannabis.
Well, we can offer quite a few services, even more so than some of the smaller state chartered credit unions and community banks that are servicing this industry, because we are $2 billion in assets. So we're fairly large. And that allows us a couple of things. We don't put restrictions on the incoming and outgoing of wires, both domestic and international. We have a robust treasury management service. We also allow for ACH, bill pay, checks, debit cards, and we've also started allowing our cannabis businesses to apply for a secured credit card.
Oh, wow.
And so we've had a few companies starting to take advantage of that. So if they need a $200,000 limit, then we open up a separate account and hold those funds for that, so that they can have those credit cards with those limits.
That's incredible, because to me, from an outsider looking in, that's the closest you're going to get to a traditional banking rate and banking relationship. We've got so many great entrepreneurs in this space, and it's just a shame that they're so handicapped by the regulations and not able to get loans, or like you said, credit cards, or even debit cards. So I think what you guys are doing is incredible. And then to back out of First Federal for a bit to focus on you, I know that you're on the NCIA Banking Committee. Are you still the head of that, or has I don't remember if I missed in your time past?
I passed the torch to Tyler Berline with Hyper last summer.
We're lightly familiar with Tyler.
He's now the chairman. I've known Tyler for a number of years. He's one of my favorite peeps. So, but yes, I've been a part of that committee for 3 years, and it's just an amazing committee. We do everything volunteer. We try to do everything we can for the industry and the businesses in the industry.
Very cool. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of your experiences? Because I'm guessing that you were chairing that committee, when there was a lot of hearings on safe banking. I know that last year there were a couple big votes that you guys had participated in. What was that experience like, sitting down with lawmakers and really advocating for what most of us believe is probably the most important thing that this industry needs to continue to thrive?
Well, when we go with NCIA for lobby days, we break up into groups, and we literally meet with the legislators and their chiefs of staff. And, it's so many of the legislators are for the industry and for helping. So the great thing is that when you tell them your personal stories of the setbacks and what you have to go through just to operate as a normal business, and all of the obstacles that, this industry has, then it's a wake-up call for them, and they start realizing more and more. And I think that's why the industry is gaining momentum legislatively.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And, there are a lot of podcasts that get a bigger audience than that, but that's part of why Robert and I wanted to start this, was to kind of let people tell their stories on a public forum, right? And lift the blanket off the cannabis industry and showcase people like yourself that are, highly professional, very, very good at what they do. You have a very deep history in doing what you do. And now you're doing it for the cannabis industry, and it's no different than what you were doing before. It's just the type of people, not even the type of people you're working for, the type of businesses that you're working for. So,
Exactly.
One thing I actually wanted to ask you, and I didn't have a chance to look it up before, but given where First Federal is located and where you guys are headquartered, were there a lot of agricultural relationships before you guys got into cannabis that kind of tip the hat there, or were you dealing with other regulated industries? I know you touched on it kind of at the top of this podcast, but I just want to get into that, just because it's amazing when someone's willing to take a risk.
Well, of course, in Florida, there is an extreme amount of agricultural businesses and need for banking, and that's one of them. But like I said, we've traditionally banked high-risk, cash-intensive industries like money transmitters, money services, casinos, even down to chicken and tobacco farms. And so it just made sense for the board of directors, seeing the landscape and the trends of, how the legislative and regulations were moving forward in Florida, that it just made sense for them to, hey, we got to get into this and help our community.
Sure. So I know you passed the torch to Tyler as far as the NCIA committee goes, but being here in Florida and then obviously having the relationships that you've built from that committee, do you still get involved in lobbying down here in Florida or even helping shape policy? And are you still involved in the national level as well?
Yes, on both. I work very closely with Holly Bell at the state level, and do what I can there, give some input, and sit in on as many of the meetings regarding policies and regulations as I can. And nationally, I like to keep my my momentum going in Washington, D.C. with all of the contacts that I have. So I'm always reaching out to one of my contacts in Washington, D.C. on certain items or issues, and to see how or what needs to be done in order to move something forward or fix an issue.
Sure. And on that note, do you see any legislation, whether it's the state of Florida or whether it's national, that's coming down that people should really keep their eye on that are in this industry? What are the type of things that are happening? I mean, I'm sure a lot of it is, I don't want to say being put on the back burner, but a lot of it's kind of being pushed aside with COVID. And I know other people are trying to get that pushed back into the mass cause of COVID, right? But outside of that, what should people be keeping their eye on if they're in this industry?
Right now, we're really trying to push forward, the Cannabis Small Business Health and Safety Act, which will include cannabis businesses in the next round of SBA assistance for disaster relief. That's what we're hoping to get accomplished and get that passed sooner before the next rounds are going out for funding. Keep an eye on that, and I'm going to tell you that if something happens, it happens quickly, and banks run out of those funds really fast. Like
Yeah.
the first round of the SBA PPP loans, unfortunately, cannabis and marijuana-related businesses were not eligible. However, the CBD and hemp businesses are eligible, and we ran out of funding within 2 days.
Wow.
That's how quick it went. So if you get your application, turn it in immediately.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. I've seen it with my dad's business and with my own business. They ran out of money quickly, but in that PPP loan, were the ancillary services eligible for that? Your private equity groups. I mean, I know they have a high amount of money, but even the law firms or the accounting firms that service the client touching, they weren't eligible for that.
No, and I had some ancillary businesses that I work closely with all the time, and it was the hardest response to give, to tell them that they just were not eligible. And, it just makes me sick to my stomach to know that I have such good relationships with all of our clients, and I normally can help them on a dime, but this time I couldn't.
No, I completely understand. I mean, it's interesting to me. I'm interested to know the thought process behind a lot of your clients when a program like this is announced. Do they just kind of automatically assume like, yeah, we're probably not going to be eligible for that because we're a cannabis company, or do they get hopeful and reach out?
It's 50-50. A lot already assume that they're not going to be eligible, and then others, if you don't ask, you don't get. So you never know when it's going to, come up. But at the same time, I have to tell you that most banks only process the applications if you are one of their primary, if they are your primary bank. If you don't bank with them, or you're not their primary, they're not your primary bank, they're not as quick to process your application.
Sure. And I'm getting into probably speculative territory here, but you would know better than I would. There are other states that are looking to create programs within their state for one reason or another, and not specifically for cannabis. Considering our state deemed cannabis essential, is the state looking to do anything to help out our businesses? I mean, to ask somebody to keep their doors open through a pandemic and ask their employees to come into work every day, while you're telling everybody else, don't leave the house, don't go out, do whatever you can to social distance. Is there any kind of rumblings in the state that might help out with something?
I haven't come across anything significant right now, and as again, it's all hearsay, so I really don't want to say anything and give anybody false hope. I just do pay attention daily to the news coming out, so if anybody wants to reach out and ask me a question, I'm more than happy to help them out.
Absolutely. So, you have a lot of close relationships with all of your clients, and it's
Mhm.
amazing. I'm sure the bank's due diligence process is extremely intricate and it, very, very thorough. Um, when your clients are looking for access to additional capital, do you guys play any kind of broker role in helping connect capital sources with these cannabis companies, or are there plans for an investment arm? It only seems natural to me that you probably know more about these companies than anybody else they're going to meet, just given the relationship that you have. So it must be, I almost want to say you guys are able to bet on the right horses pretty easily.
Well, I always tell everybody, that's looking for a bank, just your banker is going to end up being one of your closest contacts that you deal with on a regular basis. So that has helped me gain a really close relationship with everybody. But to answer your question, we do not have an investment side. When I have clients that need capital, if we are looking into real estate lending, it's on a case-by-case basis, but anything above that, I ask a few of my other private equity firms if it's okay to do an introduction. And if they allow it, then I do an introduction. But other than that, all I can do is just ask for permission.
Absolutely. Dana, we're going to pause for 1 second because somebody actually asked how they can get in touch with you. So I want to go ahead and throw your contact information up on the screen here. And this is the first time we've ever done this on Facebook Live, so hopefully it works. But for those of you asking, you can reach Dana right here. Her phone number and email address have been added to the screen. I'm assuming everybody on Facebook Live, that's what you're looking at instead of looking at us. And yeah, I'm correct. Okay. So if you guys want to get in touch with Dana, here's her contact information. I know we don't do these for every guest, but obviously banking is extremely important, and access to money during this time is even more so important. So we want to make sure that you can reach out to her, and we'll throw this up again at the end of this podcast. So we're going to go back to the podcast here, but I wanted to make sure that everybody had the ability to check that out. I think that also took me off my train of thought of where I wanted to go next. But Dana, what are some, listen, you guys are banking cannabis. You guys are offering incredible service. Even the fact that, you're helping connect capital to companies is incredible. And I don't see why anybody wouldn't want to have a relationship with you. What would you suggest for people that are looking to work with First Federal? Where do they need to be in the process? Can they get started with you when they're still in the idea phase? Do they need to be operating? Talk to us about what your client profiles look like and the type of companies that you're able to work with, beyond just the tiering, because I know we covered that already.
Right. Well, within the proper tiers, within the states that each tier is available, I have to tell you that the application process isn't, once you complete your application, again, you can expect 2 to 3 weeks for your due diligence before your account is open. But, if we have 12 applications in at the same time, there's going to be a little bit of a backlog. We don't have a restriction right now on how many accounts we can open within a certain amount of time or period to upset our concentration risk. You know, some smaller institutions can only open so many accounts, you know, a quarter, and we're fortunate enough that we are not bound by those restrictions at this time due to our size. However, I just need everybody to know, follow the directions implicitly. Any deviance from that can delay your account opening, and just don't come to me and say I need an account tomorrow, because that will never happen. You know, these do take time, and we work very diligently to get all these accounts opened in a timely manner. And we know that, you know, banking and having an account to deposit your funds is imperative to doing business. We just have to stay within our policy and within the OCC regulations. So we want to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks, right?
Yeah. And I would suggest, you know, if you're a cannabis company, if you're a CBD company, if you're someone who is a little uncomfortable with your banking relationship, to maybe start looking, right? Because I'm sure, and Dana, I'm sure you can agree with this, it's a lot easier to go through the process when you have a stable banking relationship that may or may not work out, or you're worried about it, or, you know, you have cannabis in your name, or you have the leaf on your logo, and there's a ton of other problems you're dealing with, than to wait to get that email from your bank that says, hey, you have X amount of time to get out, because you may not have that much time to go through the due diligence process. And let's be honest, you know, you're not always going to be able to drop everything you're doing and pull every resource on the bank to help somebody. I mean, I know those are extreme cases, but it's not realistic.
Right. It's not. And, you know, what I always tell everybody when they tell me, oh, you know, I have a relationship with Wells Fargo or Chase, and they know exactly what we're doing. And I say, well, your local branch banker might know exactly what you're doing, but if you call the 800 number and ask if they're banking the industry, they will emphatically say no. So those institutions, you know, that your direct contact may know what you're doing, but the back of the house doesn't. And when the back of the house finds out, it's inevitable that your account is going to be closed. So just don't wait until the last minute, because they're not accepting those businesses, they're not accepting businesses in this industry.
Yeah. And I can imagine, listen, you know, if somebody's banking with somebody for a long time, I'm sure that you have a great relationship with your banker, and I'm sure they have the best intentions, thinking, hey, we want to help you. We want to keep your business. I don't want to lose this relationship. And I know you're going to have a hard time anywhere else, but unfortunately, like you said, when the principal's office finds out, you're still going to get detention. So, you know, I would definitely watch this podcast and listen to the information, because to me, I don't see why a company in this industry wouldn't want just the peace of mind by working with a company like yours. It just makes sense to me. Dana, what information? Listen, I want to make sure that we're educating people, because I think banking is one of the most important topics in this industry, because it is very complicated. There is a lot of noise out there. You know, Tyler did a very good job of clearing it up from us from a payment standpoint, but what other information am I not asking you about that we think is important for people in this industry to know? And I know it's a loaded question. It might take you a second to come back with it.
Well, I'm going to leave the payment section up to Tyler and other payment providers. We don't offer merchant services directly. We're working to put something in place, and we're working actually with Hyper to put something in place. But again, just don't take anything for granted. This isn't your normal bank account. We do require a lot of personal information. Transparency is key, and just be diligent and flexible with your time. If we ask for information, it's best to get us that information sooner rather than later.
So I don't want to avoid this topic because I think if First Federal took the risk in banking the cannabis industry, they certainly should reap the reward, right? So how has working with the cannabis industry affected the company? Have you guys seen growth? Is business booming? And honestly, that's not a bad thing. People look at banks and they look at big institutions and they think 2008, but at the end of the day, when we have a bank that's banking cannabis, and the more accounts that they can bring in and the more assets that they could manage, the more people they can help, right? So have you guys seen that ability, have you seen a ton of growth by working with cannabis? Is the risk worth the reward?
Keep in mind, we're just barely a year old in our program, and we've seen, over 400 counts. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That lets you know that we're serious and we're not leaving the industry anytime. So unless, of course, something egregious happens, which we are more than positive that will never happen. But yes, we've seen tremendous growth, and with what we see and where we're moving into, this will probably be one of our most profitable service lines.
Very cool. And has some of that growth really benefited the rest of the industries that you service as well? I mean, I can only imagine by bringing in more money and bringing in more accounts that you're able to bring in specialists and other people. Are you seeing some of those benefits across the board?
We're getting to the point where we can take a deep breath and just exhale, and we see the revenue streams growing quarter by quarter. Of course, we like to be a lot farther than we are. This COVID crisis has, slowed down a few things, but not the tier one, because they've been deemed essential. However, I've seen a slowdown in a lot of the equity, private equity firms and the big investment deposits.
Sure. No, so Dana, thank you so much for joining us and for the information provided today. Like I said, I think you're an amazing resource for our industry. I'm glad that you're located here in the state of Florida, and I'm really glad that you became a member of Sealab and that you spend time with us. One thing that we're always interested about, and I really want to start advocating more for our group, because personally to me, it's really helped my career, is, what attracted you guys to Sealab, and how has your experience been since joining?
Actually, I came across Sealab a few years ago and attended your event in Las Vegas, and I saw the traction that you had there, and also being in Florida and being Sealab headquartered in Florida, it just made sense to take advantage of the networking opportunities and just to get out there and see who's in the industry here and see, the relationships that we can make. I really have enjoyed Sealab. Robert, you both have been tremendous.
Thank you. Well, let's give a lot more credit to Robert. People have only been seeing my face since January, and listen, I'm just a guy with a microphone, but Robert's really done a great job building this group. You're a very integral part of that group. I mean, you support many companies that are members of Sealab, and I hope once this is all over, when we have the conference in October, that you'll sit down and share your knowledge with us again for sure. Dana, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. While we're wrapping it up, I'm going to change things up. I'm going to throw your contact information back up on the screen. But do you have any parting words for us, for our guests, about, they're going to know how to contact you, but any other things you want to leave us with as far as what they should know?
Just that, thank you for having me on. Looking forward to getting out there. We are a federally chartered mutual bank, so we have the ability to bank clients in all 50 states. Tier 1 isn't there yet, but we're moving forward. So please take my number, take my email address. Feel free to give me a call or an email anytime. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have and to see if we can work together.
Absolutely. Well, Dana, thank you so much. As we said, everybody, her contact information is up on the screen, both phone number and email address. Like always, guys, I really hope that you benefited from this conversation as much as I did. Banking is the #1 topic that I think we need to cover in cannabis. It is one of the most important things that this industry needs. And not only that, but access to other traditional banking services such as SBA loans. Dana, you guys are doing amazing work. I can't thank you enough, especially being here in Florida and supporting a lot of the companies that are in Sealab. Hopefully we'll have you on again sometime soon, and maybe next time we can do a live Q&A and we can really let some smarter people pick your brain than me.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you for the show.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, thank you again for watching Elevate Your Grind. This has been an incredible episode. We are actually going to be going live tomorrow morning. So instead of being live at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, we're going to keep you on your toes. We want to wake up and have some coffee with you, but hey, we're late bloomers and a lot of us work West Coast hours. So we will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Check us out live on the Cannabis Lab Facebook page. If we're probably going to try to get us on LinkedIn, but definitely going to be live on the Facebook page. If you have any questions for our guest, or if you have any questions for us, please feel free to drop them in the comments. When this COVID thing is all over, folks, we're going to get back to regularly scheduled programs. We're going to be meeting in person again, and then we're going to be having our conference, hopefully still in October at the end of the year at the Fontainebleau, Miami. Please check us out, www.joinsealab.com. That's where you can find out all the information about Cannabis Lab. Guys, it's Thursday. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.